Boox has just released the Note Air 4C, a rather unexpected update to the Note Air line, especially since the Note Air 3C is still a solid up-to-date tablet. So what exactly does the new model bring to the table? Let's unbox it and get some first impressions to find out while I'm working on the full review. Be sure to like and subscribe to not miss that, as well as my comparisons to other e-ink tablets. The specs listed on the beautifully designed box confirm what we already knew from the official announcement. It has a 10.3-inch e-ink Kaleido 3 color e-ink screen, which is the same technology used in the predecessor. I'll explain more about how that works in my full review for those interested in the technical details. Other features include a front light with adjustable color temperature, an octa-core CPU, and a bump up to 6 GB of RAM from the 4 GB of the Note Air 3C. Opening the box, we find the Boox Note Air 4C itself, which I'll come back to in a moment. Underneath, there's a pen, a USB-C cable, and some paperwork. The stylus included is the Pen Plus version, which, to be honest, isn't my personal favorite. I prefer the Boox Pen 2 Pro, which has an eraser on top, a feature this one lacks. But that's just my personal preference. Taking Note Air 4C out of its paper wrap, its design is immediately recognizable, following the exact same design language as the previous models, which I still think is one of the best in the e-ink note-taking space. The wider grip area on one side makes it easy to hold, while the narrow bezels on the other side gives it a modern look. The color of the tablet is slightly different from the Note Air 3C, although this can be hard to notice depending on the lighting. The easiest way to tell them apart at a glance is by the logo placement and color. The Note Air 3C was a well-designed device in terms of handling, and the Note Air 4C follows suit, since the frame and overall build are essentially the same. It's got the rounded edges that make it comfortable to hold as well. It's also 20 grams lighter, which I'm not sure how Boox pulled off considering those devices are essentially identical in terms of hardware. But it's a welcome change nonetheless, making the Note Air 4C a bit easier to hold. It also looks like the screen has the same paper-like screen protector as the previous Note Air models, which is great for writing, and I'll test it in a moment. One quick note before powering on the Note Air 4C, the optionally available cover looks identical to the one from the Note Air 3 series, but with one small change. The inner lining is now made of a more textured fiber material, which seems less prone to wear and also feels nicer to the touch. It's a small change, but it should make everyday use a bit more comfortable over time. Alright, let's power it on and take a quick first look at the user interface, where we see the biggest changes. After finishing the initial setup, we land on the home screen, which for the first time on the Note Air device uses the tablet-style UI from the Boox Tab series instead of the e-reader launcher of previous models. Personally, I prefer this interface. It allows for more customization and feels more intuitive, especially if you're used to other Android devices. Speaking of Android, let's check the settings, because the Note Air 4C is the first Boox device to run Android 13. It's still not the very latest version, but it's more future-proof than Android 12 on the predecessor. And after updating to the latest Boox 4.0 software, the Android security patch also updated to October 2024, which is awesome. It seems like Boox not only watches my videos, but really listens to feedback. Comparing it side by side with the Note Air 3C, I can see that the screen's tint is a bit different. I'll be looking into this more closely in the full review to see how it affects usability without the front light. Which brings me to my biggest surprise. From the initial looks of it, the front light looks much better than on the Note Air 3C. It's noticeably brighter on the 4C, which really helps make colors pop. Of course, cranking up a front light on an e-ink device is always a bit of a trade-off in terms of eye comfort, but it's still nice to have the option. It also seems like the front light is more evenly distributed compared to the 3C, but again, this is just my initial impression. I'll have to test this more to see how it holds up. Just from a quick comparison of a couple of images, there is definitely a difference in color saturation between the Note Air 3C and 4C, especially the reds look more saturated on the Note Air 4C. It's not the biggest difference, but it's noticeable. And using the Vivid mode helps a lot more than on the 3C, but same as before at the cost of detail. The Note Air 4C also seems to show a bit less ghosting with the balanced e-ink mode, It's still noticeable, but any reduction in ghosting is definitely welcome. And when watching a cartoon on YouTube in ultra-fast mode, especially with the vivid mode enabled, the improved color performance is even more obvious, just as Boox promised. While video isn't something you typically watch on an e-ink tablet, the better color saturation here suggests that other types of dynamic content will also look better. And having seen that, I also got curious as how it compares to the color reproduction of the remarkable Paper Pro, because that one uses a true color ink screen with colored e-ink particles. The Boox Note Air 4C uses a color filter on top of a black and white e-ink screen, same as others in that space. I talk more about this in my full review. So putting them side by side with the front lights turned off, the remarkable Paper Pro unsurprisingly is better because the screen is brighter. But where it gets really interesting is when turning up the front lights. The Boox Note Air 4C gets much brighter, which improves readability a lot and colors really begin to pop. My remarkable Paper Pro even uses the brightness hack I have recently made a video about, but even that is not enough to compete with the Boox tablet. Just from this quick comparison, the Note Air 4C actually looks better in a couple of instances when it comes to color saturation. The biggest difference between the two, however, are yellow color accents. The Paper Pro is just much better in that regard. Okay, finally, before wrapping up, let's open up a notebook and quickly test the pen and writing feel. This feels very similar to the previous generation, which is definitely a good thing. The paper-like screen texture provides very noticeable friction and is satisfying to write on, and the pen latency feels just as low as before. Overall, I have to say I'm pleasantly surprised at this point. While this may seem like a small update on the surface, the Note Air 4C definitely brings some meaningful improvements when it comes to the user interface, front light, and color reproduction. From what I've seen so far, I wouldn't necessarily recommend upgrading from the Note Air 3C, but for anyone considering a color tablet, this will most likely be a very solid option. But I'll hold off final judgment until the full review, where I check everything in more detail and of course also test battery life, which was a bit of a weak spot for the predecessor. So don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss that and future comparisons to other e-ink tablets. Thanks for your time watching and see you in the next one.